Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1987 Chevy V10 pickup. Up front is a 5.7 liter V8 and down below is a 4-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Chevy pickup for a couple of reasons, but mainly the fact that this is such a fantastic quality version of the V10, which is really the K10. They switched the name in 1987. Chevy didn't know what the heck they were doing with their names throughout the late 80s and early 90s. This is really a K10, but it's such a wonderful example of one. I am very excited to share it with you today. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out. I come out to you. But let's get back to that 5.7 liter under the hood, better known as the Chevy 350. Well, it's a 350 cubic inch V8, and Chevy/GM used this engine for decades and decades. Today, we have the LS engine, which has been in production for a very long time, is pretty reliable in most formats, and GM shoved it and still shoves it into many different vehicles. Well, that's what the small block Chevy V8 used to be. This engine used to be put into so many different applications, ranging from the Corvette to these big pickup trucks. And it makes about 210 horsepower. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed manual, although it could be disputed that it's a 3-speed because first gear is technically a low gear. So this is really for crawling, towing, getting out of the mud, things like that. And then you have traditional first, second, and third gear. It is a dogleg transmission as well if you do plan on driving it in the 1-2-3 pattern. And I have to say, the shifter is right on the money. It's a fantastic feeling, very clicky into gear. The clutch is heavier than what I'm used to in most vehicles, of course, comparing it to like 80s and 90s Japanese cars. So in terms of a pickup truck, it's not bad, but in terms of every clutch I've ever felt ever, it's definitely on the heavier side. Last but not least, this particular truck is 4-wheel drive. However, you could find them in 2-wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive a 1987 Chevy V10? Well, it's sort of rough and tumble. You don't really have any of the creature comforts that you would find in other vehicles. Yes, the seats are very bouncy and that helps out the ride for sure, but the ride is still very stiff. Although this does have a 6-inch suspension lift and is on 35-inch tires, it's still a pretty rough ride. The steering is relatively vague. It has an older style steering box. Although visibility is absolutely wonderful, because in the 80s, we didn't really care a whole lot about rollover protection, so very thin A-pillars, which make it very, very easy to see out of. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 2 gauges. Off to the left is my speedometer, of course, showing that 55-mile-an-hour national speed limit at the time, although in 1987, that was pretty much over with. Chevy still put it on their gauges. And off to the right is a giant fuel gauge. On the steering wheel, I don't get anything. Little horn button in the center, but that's it. Then off to the left, we have more gauges for the battery voltage, oil pressure, a quartz clock, and the coolant temperature. Moving on to the door, we have power windows, very nice feature, power locks, a nice grab handle, some nice velour material as well. And up at the top, we do have a little smoker's window, which I love seeing in older cars, especially cars that don't have air conditioning. However, as we'll talk about in a second, this truck actually does. Moving into the center, we do get a climate control vent. This is the same climate vent used in pretty much every GM product of this era. Then we have our climate controls. Like I said, we do get air conditioning here in this pickup truck, which was very nice to see. And down below, we do have an aftermarket radio because you got to switch that out. However, this is a more classic looking radio, so I appreciate that it isn't just the Best Buy special hacked up and thrown in here. Moving off to the right more so, across the dash, we do have a Silverado badge and 2 more climate vents. Silverado was actually a trim level in this era. Again, going back to the fact that Chevy had no idea what they wanted to do with their naming in the late 80s. This is a Silverado package. This isn't a Chevy Silverado, but then the next generation, they just used the Silverado name as a whole. So it's a little confusing for sure. But moving back into the center, we do have this ominous black switch. And what this is actually a fuel tank switcher. So this truck is equipped from the factory with 2 separate fuel tanks. Now, normally there would be 2 fuel doors on either side, but when this truck was restored, a previous owner filled in the passenger side fuel door and removed the second tank. But the current owner actually put the tank back in, so it has 2 tanks again, but he didn't put in a fuel door, so it's just kind of hidden in the wheel well, which I think is a really, really good look. But very cool to see that this came with 2 separate tanks that you could switch between on the fly. Then we do have aftermarket cup holders where the ashtray and cigarette lighter would be. I love the look of this. However, this is not factory. We will do a big friggin' bottle test, and actually this does in fact pass, which is wonderful to see. However, I can't give the Chevy V10 a full pass because these aren't the factory cup holders. So unfortunately, overall, it's still a fail, but Ryan's particular V10 is a pass. Then moving down onto the floor, we do have our shifter coming out of the floor. Like I said, really tight, really, really nice shifter. And then we have our 4-wheel drive settings below. I love the fact that it's an actual shifter rather than the push button stuff that came in the 1990s. Then we do get a bench seat. Like I said, very, very comfortable, very enjoyable experience here in the Chevy pickup. GM doesn't know everything in the world, but in the 1980s and 1990s, they knew how to build a comfortable seat, and I think, honestly, they did it better than anyone else. So that reigns true here in the Chevy V10 pickup. Now, we don't have any back seats. This is a single cab with no room behind the seats. However, we do have a bed. It has a spray-in bed liner. It's incredibly, incredibly basic. Nothing crazy going on here, but here's the bed if you wanted to see it. However, talking about seeing things, let's talk about the exterior, and I love the two-tone square body paint job of this truck. I think it's so iconic. When you think of an old K10 or an old Chevy pickup or just an old pickup truck in general, I think if you gave a kid a crayon, he would draw this. And you just love to see that. It's fun to be driving something that's so iconic and so recognizable, especially in this design. Now, of course, like I said, it also does have a 6-inch suspension lift and the bigger tires. But other than that, this is pretty stock for the era, and I love driving this little time capsule. However, with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a 1987 Chevy V10 pickup? Well, first of all, I absolutely hate the name because it's very misleading if I tell people that I drove a V10 pickup truck, because they're going to assume that means the engine, and it doesn't. However, I love pretty much everything else. I was not alive in 1987, but when I get to drive vehicles like this, it really feels like a time machine with a little bit less stainless steel and one less flux capacitor. Because if you take a look at this video, this is how it rolled off the factory floor for the most part, and that's so special to me. And I think just this era of pickup truck is also very intriguing to me, because in my brain, from everything that I've driven, this is kind of a final frontier for pickup trucks. And what I mean by that is, in the 1990s, pickup trucks started to become singular forms of transportation. A mother, father, or whoever would buy a pickup truck and use it as their daily driver in the late 90s and early 2000s. That's why we started to see really nice seats. We saw the high country packages get added. We saw the platinum packages get added. You could buy a pickup truck in the late 90s and early 2000s and have it be your only vehicle and have it be a comfortable one at that. Well, that wasn't really the case pre-1990s. This truck is rough and tumble, and it's not something that you really want to drive every day unless you sign up for it. These trucks were appliances, and that was sort of the original allure that the current owner has for it. He grew up driving grain trucks and living on the farm, and he wanted something to sort of bring him back to his childhood. Well, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ryan's little time machine. And I keep saying little, it's not little. It's a rather large time machine. But this is what trucks really were, and I think this is sort of the last really truck, where it didn't have to do everything. It didn't have to please everyone. Yeah, emissions were a thing, but it didn't have a hyper focus on it. It's not an eco boost. It's not trying to please the EPA. It complied, but it didn't please them because it didn't care. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be driving this one here today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Ryan for letting me take out his Chevy V10 pickup. This is such a wonderful example of this chassis. Ryan's been absolutely fantastic to work with. Huge props to him, and especially huge props to him for keeping this mostly original. He is going to fix a couple of things here and there, but he doesn't want it to become this crazy modern pickup. He enjoys the fact that it's old and brings him a great sense of nostalgia. And it's always exciting for me to see when owners are doing that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.